Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dreamleapers Inspiration. I'm your host, Harriet Cole, so very happy to be with you today. Welcome, welcome, everyone. I hope that as the season is changing and we are feeling refreshed, going outside more than we have in, dare I say, 2 years, that there's a feeling of refreshment that we have within us and within our world. I know I've been having that experience, visiting a number of different locations and being in spaces where there's been a lot of unpredictability, particularly as it relates to weather. So I want to share that because I just think it's interesting. Uh, my family and I drove upstate New York over the weekend, and it snowed yesterday. It snowed in April. And while we knew we were driving north, the idea that it was snowing there was just a different kind of thing. And so our engagement with nature became different simply because it was different. There was an expectation of one thing and a reality of something else. And isn't that how life often is? We prepare for the moment, we plan often, not always, but we often plan, especially if we're going somewhere, there's a destination. We plan what will we do, what do we need to bring with us, how can we be ready for the moment that we're in, and then we engage in the moment, and things may be different, not exactly what we expected them to be. And in those instances, we have a lot of choices before us. What do we do in a moment, in the moment that we have prepared for, when there may be circumstances that change the dynamics of the moment? How do you pivot to be fully present in a moment that has presented itself differently than what you expected? So I just introduced this idea with the notion of weather, but the idea can fit in any circumstance. What happens when you prepare for a moment? You show up as ready as you know how to be for that moment, and it's not what you expected. What do you do then? So some people say, well, I'm going to just stick to whatever my plan was. I'm going to do whatever I declared that I was going to do in that moment and see what happens. And sometimes that works. But often, if the circumstances have changed, if the dynamics have changed, there's a requirement for us to be fluid, for us to have our eyes open, look at the moment for what it's worth, and assess what is needed now. What do I need to bring to this moment, to this engagement, in order to be fully present and to keep what I believe to be appropriate and accurate and in alignment with what I believe and what is expected? How do I keep all that together? Not always easy to do. And so today I wanted to talk about knowing our values, really being able to embrace our values and understand what that means in the context of our daily lives. So think about it. What is important to you? If you were to make a list right now, what would you write? What is important to you? When you wake up in the morning, what are the things that are just knee-jerk things that are important to you? And very often, family is at the top of that list. But that's still broad. Right? Being on time, being kind, being specific, being thoughtful, being empathetic, being direct. For some people, being indirect. What is important to you? When you have a responsibility, what is important to you? I spoke to a woman recently who was describing her growing up in a very modest household. And she now is living with tremendous abundance. But in her childhood, she grew up in a very modest household. And what she shared that was most important for her from her father was that he told the truth as he understood it. He never promised anything that he couldn't deliver. Therefore, being a man of modest means, a working class gentleman who made enough money to take care of his family but not a lot extra, he didn't promise, I'm going to take you around the world. He didn't promise, I'm going to buy you a big house. He didn't promise things that maybe could have been important to others but were out of his grasp. She said that he promised, I'm going to make sure you have a good education and make sure you understand how to treat people. And he delivered. So her takeaway about her father was that he was honest. That's a value. What are your values? What do you care about? In the end, if everything was stripped away, what matters to you? How do you show up in a moment when expectations may change, but you remain intact with your values? So I'll go back to my example of the weather because that's a simple and perhaps kind of funny one. How do you show up with your values intact when circumstances are different? So I told you it was snowing yesterday and it's spring, and that was not my expectation. But because we knew we were going north, we had layers, we had umbrellas. And so a very practical thing happened. We look outside, it's snowing, we revise our plans for what we were going to do outside and put on the gear that we needed. Because part of our value in that instance was being prepared, and the preparation that had occurred before we left home was to bring the gear that we might need. Okay, that's a really simple example. But what if we didn't have the value of preparation and we just said, it's spring. I'm ready for the sun to shine and for the weather to be warm. I'm not bringing a sweater. I'm not bringing a coat because it's spring. And in spring, it's warm. Had we done that, then we would have been cold. We would have been ill prepared. We would have been uncomfortable as opposed to being able to enjoy the moment because we were prepared for it. So the value of being prepared, I consider that a value because it helps me to think ahead. It helps me to not just be willing to be in the moment and whatever happens and we're good because we can flow. Being prepared means that we are getting ourselves ready to be able to be in the flow of whatever may come. I remember going back to it's not so much weather, but engaging the environment. So I am a city girl at heart and also a fashion girl. So, I like to wear my fashion shoes and clothes and whatever they might be. And I remember early on walking around New York City with my husband, and he likes to walk. And he would say to me, girl, you don't have the right shoes. You're not prepared. And we would walk for a while, then my feet would start hurting. And, I thought I looked cute, but I was definitely not prepared. And he helped me to open my eyes to the needs of the moment. You might be able to find some cute shoes that you can walk in. And if not, you better put on some shoes you can walk in. And we've had many conversations about being prepared for the elements. And if you have the right coat, you won't get wet or cold. If you have the right footwear, you won't get cold or wet. If you have proper layers, you can take them on and off depending upon the moment. Practical, but not things that I had thought about as a city girl who jumped in and out of cars and really wasn't hanging out in the outdoors. And so it was a really important basic lesson. Why am I saying this? Because values are basic. They're not usually nuanced. What, what is important to us? What matters to us? What matters to you? And as you learn and grow along the way, what do you discover that should matter to you? It's not enough to look good. You got to be prepared. It's not enough to smile. You have to have your heart in the right place and your understanding of how to live in the right place so that the smile is an inner smile. Does this make sense to you? We so often we walk around looking the part and having a war going on the inside, in part because our values are not necessarily measuring up with the life that we're living, with the choices that we're making, with the goals that we have set. And then that war on the inside can rage and no one may know. You might not even be aware of it because you've masked your understanding of yourself so much that you can't tell what is real and not real. You know, in this life in which we're living now, when masks literally have become part of our protection, as I contemplate that, I think of the proverbial masks that so many of us wear that shield us from insult, that shield us from pain, that shield us from sometimes potential, that may shield us from our own truth. And so when you pull the mask away, the mask that you put on yourself that maybe others can't see, but what they see is that smile. And they know there's a difference between the genuine, authentic smile that radiates from within and the plastic smile that is, why is that plastic smile there? That plastic smile is there, you think, to protect, to guard, but in reality, it doesn't work. So how do you figure out what your values are? How do you figure out what you want to have as the guiding light rather than the mask? I believe we go back to our families, to how we grew up. What did your parents teach you was important? Make a list. What did your parents teach you was important about how to live and how to treat people and how to take care of yourself? What did they teach you by what they said, and what did they teach you by how they behaved? Because often those are two different things. Go back and think about it. Even in the most challenging of households, there usually are values that stand out that your families believed in that were for survival and hopefully to thrive. And depending upon your circumstances, maybe it was just survival. And that's okay, whatever it is. What were those values? What were you taught was important? And of the things that you were taught that are important, what do you practice today? Now, my mother had so many. She would say, notice the bright lights in the room. Notice the people who connect to your heart or to your spirit, wherever you are. Because those bright lights can help to be North Stars, can help to you on a deep positive level, especially when you might be feeling a little nervous. Notice the bright lights in the room. And so the counter to that is that you could notice the negativity. You know, if you're ever speaking to a group of people and when you look out into the group, you see somebody yawning. These days, you see somebody on their device, going for it, you know, not paying attention. You see somebody talking while you're talking. If you focus on any of those things, it is going to deflate you. If instead you do what my mother suggested and notice the bright lights in the room, they are looking at you, beaming at you, connecting to you, giving you energy and support. If you decide, I'm going to see you, I'm going to see that person, the bright light, rather than fixating on the person who's not paying attention, fixating on the one who is sleeping, fixating on the one who's glaring. How many times do you choose to get all worked up by the one person who's not giving you the energy that is helpful? Sadly, people do this all the time. And so this one value that my mother taught me, which I practice every day, is notice the bright lights in the room. Okay, that's one of mine. What are yours? What were you taught? Another thing that many people have been taught, but not always, but here's a good one. Always be on time, and being on time means being 15 minutes early. Have you heard that one? An incredible value about honoring time. That to be on time is to show up early. Why? Because then you are able to be fully present, calm, ready. You might even be able to help support a moment if you're there a little bit early. If you show up early and prepared, then you have an ease about you, even the shyest person, because you are ready for whatever the moment brings. You're not clamoring for space in between other people who are rushing into the moment. You often have space to engage whoever is there because, as they say, the early bird catches the worm. You're there. Who else is there? Usually the most important people are in the room early. Make yourself one of the most important people for that moment by being early, by being on time, which means being early. Don't make excuses. That's another one. How many times do things go awry in one way or another and you immediately start up with the excuses? It's a knee-jerk reaction. Oh, this happened. Yeah, this happened because blah, 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 blah. Rather than, if you are responsible for something that didn't happen well, own it. I didn't handle this well. I forgot to do something. I didn't know how to do this, so I just put it aside. There's so many things on my plate. That feels like an excuse. So you stop there. When you feel it, there's so many things on my plate, I didn't get to that. What about, I apologize, I didn't get to that. I'll figure out a way to keep track better next time. When you feel the excuse coming out of your mouth, draw it back in. Don't make excuses. Be responsible for your actions. Say out loud when you are responsible for your actions. Don't let somebody else take the blame for something that is your responsibility. What happens when you stop making excuses and own your responsibility is that people trust you more. Because another value is, you're only as good as your word. If you say something and people believe that you are going to do what you say, that your word is bond. All these sayings that we've learned over time have become part of our vocabulary because they mean something. Your word is bond. Bond is like currency. So your word is your currency. Is that one of your values, that your word is bond? Or are you one of those people who makes excuses all the time? And so when you say things, people don't necessarily believe that it's going to be true. They think, well, I'm pretty sure that person's going to reverse course. I'm pretty sure they said one thing today, and it's likely that they're going to say something else soon after. Who are you? Are you the person that they're going to believe, they're going to trust? because your word is bond? Now, you might think you are, and I want to give you an example of how I thought I was and had to realign, because I definitely have for a long time thought of myself as someone others can trust. If I tell you something, tell you you're going to do something, I'm going to do it. And I discovered a few years ago that I was saying yes to too many things. Can you do this here? Can you do that? Will you speak at this event? Will you write this thing? Will you, whatever it is? Will you? And I would say yes. Can you? And I would say yes. And I wouldn't always remember. Not intentionally, but the juggle was so intense that sometimes things slipped through the cracks. Sometimes I forgot. And so I told someone, I'll give you a specific example. A good friend of ours had written a book and wanted me to edit the book. I should have never said yes. I didn't have time to do that. It's a big job. It's a job. It's not a favor. And I didn't have time to do it, but I didn't say that. And so I said yes, and I never got around to doing it. And I saw him a couple of years later, because I would only see him every now and then. And he said, "Did you notice that I got a little chilly with you? I don't talk to you the way I used to." And I hadn't really noticed because I was really busy. And when I thought about it, I said, as a matter of fact, yes, I did notice that. And he said, "That's because you hurt my feelings. You promised to do something and never, ever said anything about it afterward." And that was a hard moment to accept because it was true. Not only had he asked me to do this, and I had forgotten, I didn't remember until he brought it up and shared how hurt he was. Now, he may have been short term disappointed if I had said, "I'm so sorry, I don't have time to do that. I cannot agree to do that." That may have hurt his feelings because I'm his friend. He expected that I would help him, but that would have closed that door. Or I could have said, "I do not have time to do this now, but I might be able to refer you to someone who can." But simply, "No, I can't do it," is enough, is far better than yes, and then you forget. And I'm pointing this out because even the most well-meaning people, I think I'm one of the most well-meaning people, if we take on too much, if we don't pay attention and assess our capabilities, we often commit to things that we cannot fulfill. And then that compromises our values and compromises the way we are regarded. So that person stopped trusting my word because my word wasn't bond. I did not fulfill what I had promised I would do. And worse, I forgot. Has that ever happened to you? Chances are it has. Know your values. What is important to you? What is important to you about how you live, about how you treat others, about how you spend your time, about what you think, say, and do? And how can you keep checking in with yourself to make sure that what you believe to be the things that you care about, that matter to you, that you value, that you're abiding by them? Again, that's why I believe in meditation. If you quiet your mind, get still, go inside and just listen. Listen and pay attention to what that voice inside tells you. Very often, for most people, the first thing it tells you is slow down. Slow down, slow down, breathe deeply, be here now, be present, just be. If there's a swirl of thoughts in your head, and trust me, I get a swirl all the time, let the swirl quiet down, breathe through the swirl, allow yourself to just be, Just be present, just be still, just be. And as the swirl quiets down, what is left? What is left is usually what's important now, in this moment. What is left? When you can allow all of the clutter to die down, all that swirl of thought and energy and experience and responsibilities, all of that to quiet down. And then you just sit with yourself and listen and pay attention. Something emerges. It really does. And whatever emerges out of the quiet is what you're supposed to be paying attention to right now. I promise that it works. And then you capture it. After you come out of that meditation, write it down. What was that thing that came up that was so important? Write it down. And when you write it down, then you can pay attention to it and honor it. Now, many of you know I believe in writing things down every day. My to-do list that I check off as I go through the day, it has the big dreams and the path toward the big dreams with the little steps. Part of why I write it down is that I do not want to wake up in the middle of the night with, I forgot to do this. I didn't do that. That happens to me. I don't want that to happen. It does not make for a peaceful sleep. The way that I'm able to manage that and to the best of my ability avoid that is by capturing my responsibilities and goals in writing every day. And then I check them off. And I do that with my staff. The things that I value, I teach the people who are working with me to do so that we can practice the things that I value within my company. So for those of you who work with other people, make sure, especially if you're the leader, make sure they understand what you value. And by the way, you have to understand what they value so that with shared values, you are able to accomplish so much more. Knowing your value. Now, of course, I always find a quote. Let me tell you the quote that I have today. There are two. One is probably obvious. Never compromise your values. That's from Steve Maraboli. Never compromise your values. Much easier said than done. But when you live by your values, you are going to have a happier, simpler life. What the description I shared with you a moment ago about not saying no to my friend and then not honoring his request, that was an unconscious compromise of my values. And so even though this says never compromise your values, yes, of course, that's the best thing to do. But if you find yourself in a situation where you have compromised your values, stop, reassess, figure out what you did, apologize when appropriate. That includes apologizing to yourself. I didn't follow what I told myself I was supposed to do. It didn't work. Self, I'm not going to do that again. Here's the other quote that I thought was really, really good. Your attitude is an expression of your values and expectations. Your attitude is an expression of your values and expectations. That's from someone named Zabid Abbas. One more time. Your attitude is an expression of your values and expectations. So I want to give you two examples of attitude in very different ways than what I witnessed. One, a woman I know who, very well-meaning woman, with two children, who's doing everything she can to take care of her children, fiercely take care of her children. Whenever I talk to her, she's complaining. There is something wrong. Someone has done something wrong. Someone has wronged her. Someone has wronged her children. And she's ready to fight. And she's very, very smart. So the fight is usually an intellectual fight or, a strategic fight. And I'm going to say a lot of times it's important because whatever she has chosen to focus on needs to be fixed. Every time we talk, the conversation is about something that is going wrong, something that somebody is doing to harm her or her family, and how wronged she feels and how important and necessary it is for her to fight. And every time I get off the phone with her, I'm exhausted because that's not the way I choose to live in the world, fighting all the time. And it's hers. And so I actually limit my interaction with her because it drains a lot of energy from me. Okay. I recognize that her values and mine don't match. I care about her. She's a person who is meaningful in my life right now. So I will engage for a short period of time, knowing that I can only engage for a short period of time because I don't want to adopt her attitude. I want to keep mine, which is positive. My attitude, by choice and by definition of who I am, that I learned from my mother, is positive. And so I'll tell you a story about my mother, who's 92 years old, living in an assisted living facility because that's what she needs. She said, the way my life is right now is not ideal. She wishes she were living independently in her own home. And she just can't do that right now based upon her capacity. And so she chooses to be pleasant every day. The people who work in this facility tell us all the time your mother is the nicest person. She's so kind to us. She never complains. She has 1,000 reasons to complain. When people don't show up when she pushes her button and she needs something and she must have help, she doesn't complain. She just pushes the button again. She doesn't even complain internally. Like, if you look at her face, you don't see rage bubbling up or anger or frustration. She still has her fire and energy, and when people treat her wrong, she points it out, but she doesn't go into a rage. She stays pleasant. Her attitude of choosing to find the positive, like I told you, see the bright lights. Look for the bright lights in the room. Because that is her attitude, even at 92 years old, she lives by that. And if I'm thinking about complaining about something, and then I remember that, my mother, who's told them 1,000 times she doesn't like rice, they gave her rice again, she just says, please bring me something else. She doesn't boil up inside because of it. If she can do that, why can't I stay in that space of grace, that space of positivity, seeing the goodness in the moment, even if there's a lot of disappointment and disillusionment, frustration that is also potentially there. So those are two examples. Someone who's looking for a fight, someone who's looking for the light. Those are two examples of values guiding people's steps. What are your values? And how do they manifest? So that quote is that your attitude is an expression of your values. What is your attitude right now? What is your attitude? And does your attitude match what you want it to be? Because we have the capability of adjusting our attitude, of adjusting our values, of teaching ourselves to look through a different lens if the one that we have been looking through isn't serving us anymore. It is not easy. The hardest thing to do is to change your behavior. And yet we can. And so I invite you to challenge yourself. Ask yourself what matters to you. Are you living based upon the things that you believe you value? The principles of life. Are you living by the principles that you find important? And I want you to do two things. Note to yourself those principles by which you are living that work. And make sure you continue to do those things and nurture those things. And also note that which you are not living up to. What do you say you do, but you don't? What could you work on and be a lot better at? Note that too, so that you can water that plant, so that you can pay attention to something and grow a behavior, a habit that will support your life. It works. It's not easy. It takes a lot of discipline. But at the end of the day, it brings peace of mind. And that to me is worth more than anything else. Peace of mind and spirit. So I wish you peace of mind and spirit as you move forward today and in this week. And I want you to pay attention to what you value and cultivate that which you value and experience the goodness that comes when you do it. Until next time, have a great day and make it count. Namaste.